You know what nobody tells you about losing someone? It's not the big moments that break you. It's not the first holiday alone or the first birthday without a call. It's the chair. It's that specific spot at the kitchen table where she used to sit, where she'd wrap both hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to keep herself warm, where you'd argue about nothing important and about everything that mattered. That chair's still there, hasn't moved an inch, but the whole room feels tilted now, like the house itself is leaning into the empty space she left behind. Maybe she walked out the door with boxes. Maybe she walked out in a casket. The grief doesn't much care about the details. Loss is loss, and silence, real silence, the kind that fills a house after someone's gone, that's one of the heaviest things a man can carry. And here's what I've noticed. Most men don't know what to do with that weight. We weren't exactly given a manual. We were told to be strong, to move on, to keep it together. So we do the only things we know how. We work more, we drink more, we scroll until 2 in the morning just to avoid sitting in that quiet. We do anything to not sit in that chair ourselves, but running from silence doesn't make it smaller. It just makes the room feel more like a trap. That's what this series is about. Not about getting over it fast, not about dating again or winning at being single. It's about learning to sit in the silence without drowning in it. This is going to take some honesty, some patience, and some real work. If that sounds like solid ground to you, subscribe, stay with us. You don't have to do this part alone. Before we start fixing anything, we got to understand what we're actually dealing with here. Because a lot of men are walking around convinced they're weak for still hurting, like there's some timetable for grief that they're failing to meet. And that shame, the shame of still feeling it, is almost worse than the loss itself. So let me say something straight. The reason this hits you so hard isn't because you're broken. It's because of how men are wired to attach. There's a psychologist named John Bowlby who spent his career studying attachment, the way human beings bond to one another. And what research has found again and again is that men tend to build their entire emotional world inside one relationship. Women, generally speaking, maintain wider emotional networks, friends, sisters, mothers they call regularly. But a lot of men, their partner becomes their whole emotional infrastructure. She's the one he talks to, the one who knows his moods, the one who makes the house feel inhabited. When she goes, he doesn't just lose a partner. He loses his entire support system in one blow. Think of it like this. Imagine you've got one load-bearing wall in your house. Everything leans on it. The roof, the floors, the whole structure. Now imagine someone walks out and takes that wall with them. The rest of the house doesn't fall immediately. It just starts to lean. Things crack. Doors don't close right anymore. That's not weakness. That's physics. Understanding this doesn't fix the pain, but it stops you from adding guilt on top of grief. And that matters more than people realize. You can't rebuild while you're busy hating yourself for needing repairs in the first place. Knowing what broke and why is the first step toward picking up the right tools. Here's something that doesn't get said enough. When a relationship ends, whether by choice, by circumstance, or by death, you're not just grieving the person. You're grieving the future you thought you were building. You're grieving the man you thought you were going to become alongside her. The trips you planned, the version of a Saturday morning that no longer exists, the growing old you'd mapped out in the back of your mind without even realizing it. Carl Jung, a man who understood the human psyche better than most, talked about something he called the self. The idea that each of us carries an image of who we're supposed to become. And when a relationship is deeply woven into that image, when she's part of how you see your future self, losing her tears a hole in the map, you don't just lose her, you lose the direction you were heading. And that's a particular kind of grief that men rarely name. Because it's abstract. You can't point to it at a funeral. You can't explain it after a breakup without sounding dramatic. So most men swallow it. They call it moving on, when really they're just moving away, and from the pain, sure, but also from the part of themselves that needs tending to. Think of it like a wound on your hand you keep working through without cleaning. You can still use the hand, you can function, but something's quietly festering underneath. The ghosts of a relationship aren't just memories of her. They're the unlived life you're now staring down. Naming that grief, actually saying, I'm mourning something that never got to exist. That's not self-pity. That's honesty. And honesty is where healing starts. Every good carpenter knows, if you want to build something that lasts, you start by taking accurate measurements of what you're actually working with. Let's talk about what actually happens when the house goes quiet. For the first few days, maybe the first few weeks, you're operating on adrenaline. There's logistics, phone calls to make, things to figure out. The body keeps moving because it has to. It's survival mode, and survival mode is something men are actually good at. We know how to keep the engine running when everything else is falling apart. But then one night, usually a Tuesday because grief doesn't have the decency to wait for the weekends, the logistics are done, the calls are made, the adrenaline runs out, and the silence shows up like an uninvited tenant. Now here's what I want you to understand about that silence. It's not empty. It just feels that way at first. Because silence, when you stop running from it, starts to talk. It starts surfacing things you haven't had the time or the courage to look at. Old regrets, old patterns, the ways you might have showed up better, the ways you deserved better yourself. The silence is, in a strange way, the most honest thing left in the room. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who knew more than a little about loss and pressure, wrote in his journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What he understood was that the chaos is outside, but the work, the real work, happens in the quiet. Most men treat the silence like a broken radiator, something to fix or ignore. But the silence isn't broken. It's actually the first room in the house where rebuilding can begin. You just have to learn to sit in it long enough to hear what it's telling you. That takes guts. More guts, honestly, than almost anything else I can think of. All right, we've talked about the why. Now let's get into the work. And the first piece of real work is the hardest one because it requires you to stop doing something. Stop filling the silence with noise. I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because I understand the impulse completely. The TV that stays on all night, not because you're watching it, but because the sound of voices makes the room feel less hollow. The phone you keep checking, not for anything specific, just for stimulation. The nights out that turn into a habit. The bottomless scroll at midnight. The busyness you manufacture at work, so you have an excuse not to come home to the quiet. All of it is the same thing. A man trying to patch a crack in the foundation with wallpaper. It might look covered, for a while, but the crack keeps spreading underneath. Here's the truth. Everything you're using as noise right now is delaying a conversation you need to have with yourself. And the longer you delay it, the more that unprocessed grief calcifies inside you. And it starts showing up sideways. In anger you can't explain. In walls you build around people who actually care about you. In a numbness that feels like peace, but is really just distance. The practical work here is almost embarrassingly simple. Schedule silence. 20 minutes, no phone, no TV, no podcast. Sit in the kitchen, sit on the porch, sit in your truck in the driveway if that's what it takes. Let it be uncomfortable. It will be at first. Like a muscle that hasn't been used in years, the ability to just be with yourself needs to be built back up. Do it anyway. Because a man who can sit with himself is a man who can handle anything. This one's going to be short and direct, because it doesn't need much decoration. Cry if you need to cry. I know how that lands. Most of us were raised in households where that wasn't something men did. Or if they did, it was private, in the dark, in the shower, somewhere no one could see. Like grief was something to be ashamed of, something to hide like a crack in the drywall before you put the house on the market. But here's what we now know, and the science backs this up clearly. Suppressing grief doesn't neutralize it. It stores it. In your body, in your chest, in the tension across your shoulders that never quite goes away. What you don't let out doesn't disappear. It just goes underground and starts affecting your pipes from the inside. The Stoics, those tough-minded Romans that a lot of men find useful, are often misread as feel nothing. That's not what they taught. Marcus Aurelius grieved openly for the loss of people he loved. Epictetus talked plainly about sorrow. What they taught wasn't the suppression of emotion. It was not being ruled by emotion. There's a significant difference between a man who feels and a man who drowns. Feel it, name it, Let it move through you the way a storm moves through, fully with force and then out the other side. You are not weaker for loving someone deeply enough that losing her broke something in you. That's not a character flaw. That is the price of having lived something real. The men I respect most are the ones who can sit with that reality without flinching. Not because they don't feel it, because they're honest enough to feel it completely. That's not weakness dressed up. That's courage in its most unglamorous form, okay? You've sat with the silence, you've let yourself grieve without shame. Now comes the part where we pick up some actual lumber and start building something. Because here's the thing about grief. It will occupy every space you leave empty. It's not cruel, it's just nature. A vacuum doesn't stay a vacuum. Something always fills it. The question is whether you're going to be intentional about what that something is, or whether you're going to let chaos decide for you. What most men lose when a long relationship ends isn't just emotional. It's structural. Your days had a shape. There was a rhythm, someone to cook for, someone to come home to, a shared calendar, a shared language for what evenings looked like. That structure is gone now, and without it the days can start to bleed into each other in a way that's disorienting. So build a new structure, deliberately, like a man laying a foundation. This doesn't mean filling your schedule so full you can't breathe. It means giving your days anchor points, a consistent time to wake up, a walk you take most mornings, a meal you actually cook for yourself, sitting at that table. Yes, that table, instead of eating over a sink. One thing each week you do for no other reason than it connects you to who you are outside of a relationship. What did you love before she was in the picture? What got set aside, a hobby, a craft, an old friendship that drifted? Start pulling those back in, not as distractions, as genuine acts of self-reconstruction. A house that's lost a load-bearing wall needs new support beams. Not the same ones that fell, but new ones placed deliberately, designed to carry weight differently than before. You're the architect now. Start drawing the plans. There's something I've seen happen to men in long relationships, and I want to name it plainly. We let our friendships go, not intentionally. It happens the way most slow losses happen, gradually, one small priority at a time. The guy's night you skipped because she had something planned. The old friend you meant to call back but didn't. The group text that went quiet because your life moved in a different direction. And then one day you're standing in an empty house and you realize the list of people you could actually call, really call, not to make small talk but to say, "I'm not doing great," is a lot shorter than you thought. This is one of the quieter tragedies of male isolation, and it's not weakness, it's a pattern. But patterns can be interrupted. This is the moment to rebuild that infrastructure. Deliberately, humbly. Reach out to someone you lost touch with. Don't overthink it. Don't make it dramatic. Men reconnect over doing things, so call someone and suggest something concrete. A cup of coffee, watching the game, helping him move something heavy. The conversation you need will happen on the side of something else, the way it always has. And if the honest truth is that you don't have those connections right now, then this is your signal to start building them. Find a group, a gym, a volunteering outfit, a faith community, a men's group if one exists near you. Start showing up somewhere consistently. Brotherhood doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in regular, repeated presence. A man who can only hold himself up has half the strength of a man with one good friend at his side. We weren't designed for isolation. Not a single one of us. Don't let pride convince you otherwise. I want to talk about something that gets skipped over in most conversations about loss, because it sounds almost offensive to say out loud. There is something valuable inside this pain. Not in a everything happens for a reason way. I don't believe in giving people fortune cookie wisdom when they're genuinely hurting. But in a real, structural way, forced solitude, if you don't run from it, has a tendency to clarify things. When the noise of a shared life goes quiet, when the constant negotiation of two people living together falls away, you start to hear yourself again. Your actual preferences, your actual values, the things you'd compromised on so long you'd forgotten they were compromises. Jung called this process individuation, the work of becoming more fully yourself, not the self shaped by a relationship or by what was expected or by the role you played for 20 years, but the deeper self, the one underneath all of that. That process is painful. There's no way around it. It's like stripping old paint and it makes a mess before it looks better. But what you're uncovering is something solid, something that was always yours. Men who have come through real loss and done the honest work, not just survived it, but actually sat in it and wrestled with it, tend to come out the other side with something that's hard to fake, a quiet steadiness, a groundedness. They know what matters and what doesn't because they had to find out the hard way. The empty chair is not the end of your story. It is, in a brutal and backhanded way, an invitation to write a more honest chapter. One where you know yourself well enough to know what you actually want to build next. That is not a small thing. That is worth something real.